what something is not the same as what it means. But to understand that, you will need to do more than simply watch. You must learn to see. Perhaps here, you can begin.
Hello, and welcome into the Ringerverse, your Nexus feed for all things fandom. I am Ben Lindbergh, senior editor of The Ringer, welcoming you to our penultimate podcast of 2024. I may be the front man today, but I can't keep the VIPs happy without some help. So with me is a VIP, a very important podcaster, a Ringer staff writer who could have voted X to go home, but instead voted Circle to play one more pod. Daniel Chin. Hello, Daniel.
Hey, Ben. Thanks for having me. Happy holidays.
Same to you. We are the Watchers. We are your guide through these vast new realities. Follow us and ponder the question, what if we binged all of Squid Game Season 2 and What If Season 3 and hopped on mic to talk about it? That's what we're doing today. The week between Christmas and New Year's is ripe for vegging out and catching up on content. And that is what we are here to help with. Now, normally at the end of the month, that's when we present the latest edition of Ringerverse Recommends, our collection of testimonials from the whole Ringerverse crew. And you are still getting that at the end of this episode. So stay tuned to hear the whole crew chime in on what they've been watching or reading or playing or listening to this month. But this time, Ringerverse Recommends is just a bonus because you are also getting essentially a full-length podcast prelude. We have a full itinerary today. We'll be wrapping up with Ringerverse Recommends, but first we're talking Squid Game Season 2, and then What If Season 3. The first seasons of these series premiered about a month apart in the summer of 2021. Both will end after 3 seasons. So this is the end for What If, the Marvel animated show on Disney+. It is season 2 of 3 for the live-action Squid Game on Netflix. We won't go out of our way to spoil things, but we will discuss the events of these seasons and do some speculation. So be warned, check the timestamps, listen selectively if you haven't finished everything yet. So let's start with Squid Game, which is on everyone's mind right now. Netflix gave us the NFL and Beyonce for Christmas, and then Squid Game for Boxing Day. Quite a flex. And really, what could be more festive than watching a bunch of destitute, deeply in debt people fight for their lives, sometimes against the system, sometimes against each other? Did this just get you in the holiday spirit, Daniel?
Yeah, I mean, the timing of Squid Game, always around the holidays, nothing quite like it. I mean, it's a perfect timing, and just the way that they've really rolled out the red carpet for this. I mean, to your point with the whole Netflix football, NFL, Christmas, and Beyonce leading up to it, and even just like hopping on Google today to see what people are talking about with Squid Game Season 2. They had a whole like red light, green light animation where you could like play the game right there on your Google screen. So it's,
yeah,
they've come back in a big way for Season 2.
Yeah. Also, always a little fraught to gamify Squid Game in real life, whether that's via reality show or video game. Why don't we turn this deadly struggle, this classist commentary on modern life into a fun game that we can play on our phones and TVs? But we do it anyway. Maybe that's part of the commentary. But like Kate and Jack, we've got to go back. We're going back to the island. Let's give a green light to our discussion of Squid Game 3 or Squid Game Season 2. And really, like, this season, I think, had much higher expectations, obviously, than Season 1, which was just a huge surprise for everyone. So that was part of what made this more challenging, I would say. They're following up a global phenomenon here instead of something that took us all by surprise. Plus, the surprise of Squid Game was just the look of it, the bloodiness of it, all of that just hit us like a ton of bricks back in 2021. And now we're expecting it somewhat. Plus, you have to come up with a reason for Gyun to get back into the games that doesn't feel contrived, because we're going back to the games, but why? Why would you ever go back? So you have to come up with a reason for him to want to go back. Then you have to make the games interesting. You have to somehow top what they came up with in season 1. You have to create a new cast to replace all the characters who were killed the first time around. So this is a challenge. And as you wrote for TheRinger.com, what a great website, this was not planned from the start, right? This was originally envisioned as a single season story.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, to your point too, I mean, I feel like a lot of what really worked the first time around was just how much Squid Game was disarming its audience, and just the pure shock of how violent and gruesome it was from that first episode and from that first game of Red Light, Green Light.
Yeah.
And to have a reason, like all the Lost references, a reason to go back and a reason to get back in there is already just enough of a challenge on its own. And just the heightened expectations coming back in and really finding a way to top a show that surprised everybody. And now, like, everybody's eyes are on it. So, yeah, I mean, I don't know. What did you think?
It can be dangerous because you have an unexpected success that just takes streaming by storm and then becomes this big franchise. And then, of course, there's pressure. We want more of this. And how many times have we seen that? And how many times have these content creators gone astray, just trying to turn everything into a universe when maybe it's not so suited for that? We're getting Dexter spinoffs. We're getting billion spinoffs. Everything is a franchise, right? And we've seen with Marvel, we've seen with Star Wars, sometimes you can take that too far. And especially if you have something that is meant to be a self-contained story, and then you say, this is just too big to stop, so we have to make more. And sometimes it can be very transparent that that's what you're doing. It's just like, this formula worked so well, let's run it back, let's do it again. People will watch it, we probably would. But there's a challenge to not make it feel like you're just doing this for the money. To some extent, the creator of Squid Game, as you noted in your piece, was kind of doing this to profit, right? To be compensated in a way that he wasn't the first time around.
Yeah, I mean, it's such a shame, because for a show that ended up becoming the most popular show that Netflix has ever done, for him to not have really gotten any compensation for it is pretty wild. And just it's sad that he had to basically sign away his rights over the intellectual property, just because of the way that this system is kind of built to empower the streaming services, the big corporate giants, and just because of some of the archaic copyright laws that there are in South Korea, like their inability to get the proper compensation for this. And this is, I feel like, one of the tipping point for what's been this whole big conversation the past few years as a result of it.
Yeah, you got to get those residuals if you can, but the streamers don't do that so much anymore. And so you have Hwang Dong-yuk is creating a second season, which hopefully he can make bank on. And of course, working on more seasons and spinoffs. And we can talk about the franchise potential here. It's funny, he's been very open about the fact that he kind of just wants to get his here. And
yeah.
It's like, it's my turn to make some money here, like the contestants on Squid Game. And he said he's like sick of it temporarily for now. He wants to go live on an island where Netflix can't call him, but they are calling him. They want him to make more. So the question is, does it ever feel like that to you when you're watching this? If you didn't know that this was a single season show that they decided to try to turn into a 3-season show, would you get that feeling? Did it ever feel to you like this is reheated and rehashed and they're just trying to string us along and keep it going? Or did it feel like this was the plan all along, or at least they have found a way to extend it that doesn't feel like a pure profit play?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a good question, because just even the way that they ended season 1, even though he had this vision of it being a 1-season story, they left some opportunity for it with the fact that he didn't get on that airplane after he dyed his hair red, which even in hindsight, I don't know. Was this like a purely Netflix reference? I don't know.
But how many times did people say, you should have gotten on that plane? That would have been the best thing for you to do.
Right. Finally spend time with your daughter, maybe.
Yeah.
But he left the door open from that very point. And it's just that whole element of like, okay, well, now he has this motivation to get revenge for all the people that died because of these games. So he has this motivation to shut them down. And I think that is a really interesting starting point to continue this story. And I think that season 2 does a good job of still reinventing itself in a lot of different ways. Like, as I wrote in my piece, to like showing more perspectives, including showing the perspective of one of the guards and how she got involved in it, and just a little bit more behind the scenes. But I think my biggest frustration is just the way that the way it ends, where it's like very sudden. It's a cliffhanger that feels like you're ready to just go to the next episode, play next episode, and that's it. And we got to wait a whole nother year for it to happen. So that part was the most frustrating part for season 2, and I think probably for a lot of viewers as well.
Yeah, fortunately not a full year. It's supposedly coming summer or fall, which feels quick because we've waited 3 years, more than 3 years, for this thing to return. And we're used to that at this point because we've seen so many extended breaks between seasons. And it's not a trend that anyone's particularly happy about, I don't think. The fact that we're routinely going 2.5 years, 3 years between seasons of these big shows, especially VFX-heavy shows. But it's partly strikes related. It's partly just the production pipeline, everything getting a bit backed up there. But it's not just that, I don't think. It's also just the time it takes now with the VFX demands, just with all of the roadmap that you're laying, all the track for these franchises. The silver lining, I guess, is that it rarely feels like we don't have enough to watch, because even if it's taking 3 years for individual series to return, there's always something coming, even as the streamers are sort of downsizing. But it does require catch up when you've gone 3 years, especially with a show like this that just about everyone binged, I think, in maybe a day or two when it first came out. I had to refresh my memory. I went back and I didn't rewatch the entire first season. I rewatched the finale and then read a bunch of synopses and just had to really get myself caught up. So I don't know about you, what your prep was for this season, but that's just an institutional hazard with TV these days, where we get shorter and shorter seasons and also longer interludes between them, where I'm just not at all in that same headspace and I have to refresh my memory before I dive back in.
Yeah, no, exactly. Like for me, I actually didn't do much of a refresher when I dove into season 2, and I totally regretted that. I ended up having to go back and rewatch all of season 1 afterwards, because I had some time to write my piece as well, and I was like, I'm sure they connected it a lot more than I expected, including down to the like some of the characters that had a very minor role, like a 1 season role in season 1 that had a bigger role to start the season, especially like the loan sharks that he's dealing with early on, like having that part in it. So it was cool to. I definitely don't recommend that route, going backwards afterwards, but it was rewarding in the sense that I could see little things that they were building on, at least, and different things that they were referencing from season 1.
Yeah, and it does pick up right where season 1 left off.
Yeah,
there's no time break whatsoever, at least initially. There is a little bit later. But basically the framing here is that he's going back for a different reason. This time he has a whole stack of cash just sitting in his abandoned building, Heisenberg from Breaking Bad style, and he's not trying to add to his stockpile or his windfall. He is trying to take down the games. And it's not actually his intention to be a competitor again, but he gets outsmarted. And so that's the way that we're upping the ante here, is that it's not just about survival. It's about being a revolutionary. It's about trying to take the games down from the inside. Though, again, that's not the initial plan. The initial plan is to take it down from the outside. And he gets outsmarted at every turn, which really, he significantly underestimates the organizers of the games, I would say. They've been doing this for, decades, since the 80s, right, in the Squid Game lore, and somehow this has not leaked. Despite all the contestants, despite all the guards, the secrecy has been preserved. And he thought he was just going to put a little tooth tracker in his mouth and that would do it. And then his special ops mercenaries would roll right in there and that would be that. Not so fast. So they have outthought him. They anticipated everything. That is part of just the mystique of the games, is that they're always at least one step ahead a lot of the time. And so he finds himself back in the same situation as season 1, except this time he is armed with the knowledge, the experience that he gained going through the games the first time. And the really compelling thing about this season, I think the thing that maybe makes it feel even more justified that they kept this going, that there was much more story to tell and not just more money to make, is that this really becomes kind of a commentary on people participating in the games, whereas the first season is largely about these oppressed, downtrodden people. It's the system, it's society. They're forced into these games. They're forced to fight to the death and scrap and scrape for every cent. In this case, it's almost more about the fact that they don't want to leave, that even having been forewarned, even for Gyun to come in and tell everyone what is about to happen, that is not enough to convince them to leave, which in some ways is kind of a darker commentary on the individual. You know, it's not that everyone was a good guy and they were all easy to root for in season one necessarily, but in this case, I find myself feeling more and more frustrated at the participants, which I think is part of the point.
Yeah, that's a great point. And I think it is a really interesting twist on the concept of from the first season. And I think director Huang was like saying it to the Hollywood Reporter, like the theme that he was really exploring in this season was like, is the majority always right? And that's a very inherently political idea, and they're never shy about just being extremely on the nose in the way that they're exploring these concepts. But I feel like from the very first time they do the whole voting process again, and you see how people are still pushing forward for whatever reason that they're making up, or a reason that they're choosing not to believe Gian and everything he's telling them about these games and how they should get out there. And I think it makes for a really interesting new dynamic for them to explore.
Yeah, it's this sort of nightmarish aspect to things, that kind of nightmare where there's something you're trying to escape and you just can't get away with it from it. And it seems like you should be able to. You can see it coming, but it just catches up to you no matter what. He can't get out here. And you'd think that he'd be able to just stand up and make this impassioned speech, as he does several times. And it falls on deaf ears, or sometimes it actively backfires because people say, oh, this guy's been through the games. He won them before. He can tell us what to do.
Right.
And they actually decide to stay because of his presence, which is the opposite of what he intended. So then it becomes kind of this commentary on human nature. And he's trying to liberate these people who don't want to be liberated and don't want to be enlightened. And do they even deserve to be rescued? Is this all entirely pointless? And in some ways, he is still helping people. Like, I went back and watched in the red light, green light game the first time in season 1, I think 259 contestants are eliminated. And in season 2, they play the same game and only 91 are killed, which I would say is maybe partly a testament to the fact that he's warning everyone, that he's doing his, shouting with his mouth blocked by his elbow. Even though everyone thinks he's some sort of madman, they are listening to him to some extent, and he maybe does actually save some lives there. But then people end up being pissed that not more people died, because it means that less money for them, right? So he's it's like a damned if you do, damned if you don't.
Yeah. I think the choice to have that be the one game to return from season 1 to season 2 was a really good idea too, because it shows him being able to take this role where he's like, all right, I actually did do all these games. I won this, and he has this powerful position to start from it. But then they flip it from the second round on, and I think that's another way for them to just also explore new things with this second season, and with showing new games and having not just the repeat of the games from the first season. I think everybody was probably expecting that, because you can't just run back the same games again. But having that be the one, because it was so iconic too from season 1.
Yes. Yeah, but so much of the success of the show is the imagery, is just the costumes and the environment and the creepy doll and all of that. And so there's a little less of an impact the second season, just because we've seen all of that before, and it really is sort of instantly iconic. We probably overused that adjective, but I think it applies in this case. So that packs a little less oomph the second time, when it's, okay, we're back in the Squid Game world. It's not necessarily breaking that much new ground visually speaking, but I think it did make sense to start there. And then we start to think, as Gyun does, that, okay, maybe it's just going to be the same sequence of games over again. And that would be a bit boring. That would not please the VIPs or the Netflix viewers. And then, of course, we do deviate, and he's caught unawares, and they trust him even less because he's been telling them that he knows what to expect. Now, we get sort of a a slow pace at times to the season. Season 1 did that too and took its time. And a lot of the meat of the show is between the games and getting to know the people and seeing all the interpersonal relationships. Although given that this is a 7-episode season down from 9, I didn't know going in that this would be unresolved, that this would just be sort of a setup for season 3. And so I did start to get that sense part way through the season where I'm doing the math and I'm like, wait, how many games have we seen here? And we're not getting close to the end and there are only X episodes left. And so it does become clear at a certain point that we're not actually going to get this story answered. But we get to meet a whole new cast of characters for the most part, or some characters get dramatically expanded roles. Of the new characters, which did you find most compelling, or did you gravitate toward the new crew as much as season 1's?
I think for me, one of the most interesting to see was the guard's perspective, the guard 111. Mm-hmm. I felt like that was one of the instances where I was also most frustrated by it being like an abridged second season, because I felt like it started off really strong with her motivation and this whole relationship that she has with the little kid that she met at the parade, and following that kid's father as he gets into the games himself, because she like kept on looking at him and like following how he was doing throughout the games, but there's never actually any resolution to that. And it's unclear if he even survives at the end of it. So I was like waiting for there to be like a classic, like end of season, like let's show where everybody is before the season ends to catch everybody up before the end of it. But there wasn't that. So I'm hoping that there's a payoff with that in season 3. In terms of the players, I actually really just enjoyed seeing the frontman being able to become a full-fledged character this time, and have him not be hidden behind a mask as well. And seeing that whole dynamic start to evolve and become a little bit more interesting between him and Gi-hun.
Yeah. Yeah, I felt that way too, that some of the ancillary storylines were a little underserved just because there was only so much time to go around. So I like that we're getting a look at the guards and trying to get in their heads and figure out why they would want to do this. And then you also have the searching for the island storyline, Jun-ho with his hired crew, and you get the twists there. It's, sort of easy to foresee that the captain who picked him up, was not just a good Samaritan, that he's working for the organizers of the games and he's been stringing him along this entire time and keeping tabs on him and monitoring him. So that's also sort of fruitless, and they're getting outsmarted at every turn, and you kind of get the sense that that's what is what happening. Presumably that's going to go somewhere, and they will ride into the rescue, or they'll play some part in the larger story. But they're basically just being given the runaround for the entirety of season 2, which is a little frustrating, I guess, for them and also for us. But I do like the new cast, definitely sympathetic characters, interesting alliances, betrayals, and also enjoy the frontman, which is, I guess, the big twist of the season. What, a few episodes in, when we find out that the frontman is participating personally here. And I guess it's sort of, again, running back the twist from season 1, in a sense, where we find out that a participant in the games was the creator of the games. So, again, it's not quite as original as the first time around, maybe, but it is a really interesting dynamic between those two characters. And just, really excellent acting. It's cool when, these huge K-drama stars can become, Hollywood stars via Squid Game or via some other international show that gets big, and everyone realizes, oh, wow, these guys have been great for a really long time. So what is your read on the frontman's motivations or feelings here? Obviously, there's the big betrayal at the end where he doesn't unmask himself. I guess he remasks himself. But why is he participating here? Is it purely for the entertainment of the VIPs? Is it purely to monitor Gi-hun and kind of keep a close eye on him and make sure he doesn't screw up the games? Is it personal in some sense for him? Because it does seem like there's an element of fascination that the frontman has with Gi-hun here, that he sort of wants to understand what makes him tick, and they have the connection of both having been participants in the games before.
Yeah, I think that's a good point. I think there probably is some personal element to that too. But for me, I think one of the big things that the show is just trying to explore is how these two characters have responded to winning the games. Because the front man, well, I guess it was 2015, he his brother finds it on a binder in the first season that he was a previous winner. And they haven't really explored that element too much of it. But his response to it was going and actually running the game and perpetuating this really messed up, like torturing people that are at the end of the ropes. But for Gihan, it's like the complete opposite, where he still sees the good in humanity and the innate goodness of humanity.
Yeah.
And him
so
trying
far.
to prove that.
At
least so far.
Yeah.
At least so far. So I think that being like a main point of contention, just showing the two different sides, and that is a big element of it. I'm assuming they're going to show a lot more of like the front man's perspective on that side of it, because we haven't gotten to see, like, it's what I find interesting about this season too is just how much he's actually himself in this when he's playing this role, or how much of it he's just fabricating to build a persona to gain trust for the people around him. Because there is that little bit where he his like kidney, he needed a kidney, and his wife didn't get that kidney because
and we hear a little bit about that backstory with the brother and the mother outside of the island. It did seem like he's playing this for real, right? I mean, he is in this thing, he's shooting guards, right? At the end, he does turn around and betray the contestants. But for a while there, he's actually gunning people down. I get the sense that if he's eliminated from the games, like, he's going down too, right? Like, this is part of the stakes for him. And there is that little freak out he has when they're doing the 6-legged competition with the 5 different stages. And he's doing the top spin, where you have to wind the thread around the top and then cast it and have it spin. And he momentarily just loses it, right? And it seems like that's authentic or genuine. I guess you could say maybe, again, he's playing a role. He's sandbagging here. He's trying to look like he's losing it to put people at ease and make them think that he's just one of them. But it was a convincing acting job, if that's all it was. And then it comes down to the final seconds and they survive. So part of it, I wonder, is just he hasn't felt as alive as he did when he was a contestant, which maybe was the same motivation as the creator jumping in and participating directly in season 1. Maybe it's just not the same high for him standing up there behind his mask, watching everyone through a screen. And maybe there's some part of him that is kind of morbidly attracted to laying his life on the line again.
Yeah. I really don't know how it's going to turn out with the dynamic with him and his brother, because they still didn't really explore his brother's perspective too much, in the sense that, like, I think on some level we understand that he wants to understand why the front man why he's become this way, at least for Junho, and like for him to have some answers for why he's completely upended his life to do this. But I think that, again, like, that was one of my issues with the season, because there's still so many answers on that front. I guess we'll see how many episodes are also in this last season. But I wondered a lot as I was watching if they should have, like, branded the season differently, like if it should have been part 1. Like, because I feel like Netflix is always switching up the release process too, whether it's like releasing a season in like 3 different parts, or the first half of it here and there. But I don't know if you had any thoughts on that.
Yeah, maybe like a Stranger Things style staggered batch release. Yeah, because he said he initially envisioned it as just one narrative. And then he said he wrote it and it ended up being over 10 episodes, and that was too long for a single season. And I'm thinking to myself, we used to have a world where television seasons could be longer than 10 episodes. It's okay. That doesn't have to be a hard cutoff. But these days, I guess it does, especially if you have this global streaming phenomenon. You want to milk that for a while. And yeah, you could have said this was season 2, part 1 or something. And maybe that would have helped set expectations a little better for people who will be disappointed that there's not a lot of resolution at the end of this season. Ultimately, it doesn't matter that much to me, because I'm just going to watch it whenever and however they put it out. So it's more marketing and branding than anything else. But I'm just glad that it'll be a quick turnaround because they've already shot it, right? They kind of filmed
they did it
consecutively.
back to back.
It was all written at the same time. So there won't be as long a wait, which is quite a relief, I would say. And, another thing is that I felt almost a little frustrated with the games and particularly the voting, the pace of some of that at times, because now we have voting after every game, after every round. And I guess part of the point of that is just to reinforce, to hammer home the theme of the season, which is that you can keep giving people chances and they will keep screwing things up. It really does drive home just the fact that people refuse to be helped, even if you try to help them at times. But visually speaking, it's a little tiresome given that we kind of know what's going to happen, right?
Yeah.
They're not going to vote to go home because we have more episodes to watch, right? So you have to watch the entire everyone lining up and the montages of the circles and the X's and counting up time after time after time. And, the sort of faux suspense of, will enough people change their votes this time to send us home? And we know that they won't, right? So that I did find a little, again, given that we know we have 7 episodes here, there's only so much, I guess, new ground that you can break each time that you do that. And even the games sometimes, the games themselves were entertaining, but there were times that I felt, especially with that multi-event round where we saw so many teams do it that by the time it was over, I felt like I could have done it myself. Like, put me in and I could do the dice game. Like, I'm ready. I've seen this so many times already.
Yeah.
So, it's all meant to amp up the suspense, but there were times that I felt a little impatient. Maybe it's me, but I kind of wanted to move on a little bit faster at times.
Yeah, I think it's tricky and it goes both ways when you have all 7 episodes at your disposal. Because at a certain point, it's like, if you're watching one episode and then not much happens and they drag it out and you got to wait a week, I would go crazy. But at least you have that next one you can immediately binge to, and that's definitely a part of their rationale. But at the same time, when you have nothing at the end of that 7-episode run, that's where some of that built up frustration comes out, and you're like, all right, well, why did we watch some of this?
Yeah. Yeah. But look, the cast is great. All the actors are good. Some of them are infuriating in a way that they're meant to be, and it works. I am very upset at the sea shaman, whatever we're calling her. Very frustrating character, but
Thanos was a lot as well.
Thanos, R.I.P. man. Like, good segue into the second part of this podcast in a minute, I guess. But yeah, wow, what Marvel product placement there. Just, I'm disappointed. You ranked the rhymes that we got. And there were only 2. So I would have liked to.
Like, do I even rank this? Because there's only 2 verses.
Yeah, I would have liked to hear a little bit more of his work personally. But, I like his look. Very distinctive. So, they're good at just cramming all kinds of characters from all different walks of life and giving us enough insight into their personality or their background or the quirks of their characters that they don't feel just like archetypes, that we actually feel like we get to know them a little bit, which is nice. So we get the twists. We get an Andor-style prison revolt, which doesn't end as well as Andor's does. I guess it's saying something when your show is bleaker than Andor in some respects. You're really sounding the depths here. So I wonder what we're headed for then. We get the betrayal at the end. We get our protagonist dragged away, frustrated, mourning the death of his friend, which he's being blamed for. Every time he tries to free people, it fails and sometimes arguably ends up putting them in an even worse position than they were previously. So you have to wonder, will there be some sort of heel turn for him? Will there be a join me and together we can make the games even more sadistic moment where the frontman makes the appeal to his comrade in the games here and says, look what we have revealed about human nature. Are you still trying to fight for these people? And then I guess the ultimate bleak twist would be if the good guy becomes the baddie and just gives up and, decides to become a frontman or a VIP himself. I don't know that I can see that turn happening. That might be too far even for Squid Game, but what are you thinking for the second part of season 3, or I guess season 3 itself here? Are we going to see questioning of everything and potentially turning back on these ideals, or ultimately will it be sticking to his guns, if not literally, then figuratively?
Yeah, it's a good question. I think the creator inherently probably wants to have a good message come out of this. So I think it would be a little bit too cynical for him to turn heel and become the one that perpetuates this game. But at the same time, knowing that Netflix is going to want to have as much from this franchise as possible, there is definitely a scenario in which it doesn't end. I still think that ultimately it's gonna come down to him putting a stop to the game, there being some sort of payoff with them trying to shut it down from the outside. And I mean, definitely like with the stinger at the end of the finale as well. We see a glimpse of what appears to be a new game with another creepy, massive doll, childlike doll. So I think like we've only gotten 3 of the rounds. I think we'll have a reason for there to be another 3 rounds somehow for the games to resume, and then for Gi-hun to ultimately figure out a way to shut it down in the end.
Yeah. What do you make of that little mid-credits stinger where we just get a glimpse of, I guess, level 2 of red light, green light, where it's not just one doll, but now we have a boy doll too? Is this, and we do see the backs of a few of the survivors, I think some of the circle team. So I don't know whether this just means, okay, now you've misbehaved and we're going to make the games even harder, or whether there's some sort of, intra survivor rivalry, even more so than usual, where we get the circle crew against the X crew, or what's left of them at this point. Or is there some sort of, turning them against each other even more? Or what do you think this portends, if anything?
Yeah, it was interesting to me that there was even a stinger at all. It just felt like very against what the show had been, kind of like the vibe of it, at least. It's such a Disney like franchise building, Star Wars, MCU kind of thing at this point, I feel like. But I feel like, if anything, it's showing that there will be more games. And for whatever actually happens with, if they're pitting the players against each other, they're surviving players against each other or not, I think just to show that there is going to be more games, there is going to be some more exciting sets for us to look at. But how it happens, I guess we'll find out pretty soon. I don't know if you have any thoughts, any predictions.
Well, shout out to Lee Byung-hun, who's the front man. I thought he was excellent. And also R.I.P. Gong Yoo, not Gong Yoo, the actor, but the salesman, the character he plays, who I really miss just his unhinged energy. Like he's the highlight of this cast to me, maybe just his like total commitment to the games, and just how purely sadistic he is. He's somehow he's 45 years old, which looks great. Drop the skincare routine, the salesman. But I love seeing that guy just because he's out in the outside world and he's still very much acting like he's on the island. Just love that character, and gonna miss him. But, he stuck to his guns literally to the end.
Him stomping out the bread was definitely the most unhinged moment of the entire season.
Yes, very much so.
Flipping up his hair afterwards. He's like sweating. This manic look on his face.
He will be missed. And I guess the future of the franchise, since you detailed this in your piece, it's not just that we're getting stingers and teasers and a season 3 here, but we're also going to get spin-offs. We're maybe going to get prequels. Who knows? It sounds like there is a whole Squid Game universe coming, which I have mixed feelings about. But what do you think that's going to look like?
Yeah, I mean, at least for one of the only projects that's been reported is David Fincher being involved with one. And I think if it wasn't David Fincher being involved with it, I would be very skeptical and would not be looking forward to that, because I don't love the idea of there just being like an English language version of this. But I think that he's a really interesting fit if he actually is very involved and not just a big name to attach to it. I don't know about there being like an international spin to it. I guess I could see it happening, and I think there's a lot of room that you could do it, because in the first season, one of the VIPs references that Korea has the best contest, something to that effect. So that seems like a pretty wide open space for them to try to explore, whether that's doing a fully American game, which I guess would just be Squid Game: The Challenge or wherever. I guess that was in the UK. I didn't even watch that, but I think it speaks to what they're really looking for as a franchise, and I don't know how much of that I will be able to stick around for.
Yeah,
because they really seem to be planning a lot.
Yeah, everyone's asking for Mindhunter season 3, and David Fincher's like, "I'll give you English language Squid Game," which was. Who is asking for that? Are people asking for that? Are people like, I can't watch Squid Game because it's not in English natively? Clearly the show has traveled. There are cases where it makes sense to do an English language version of something. But this doesn't seem like one of them, because clearly it's not an obstacle to the popularity of this series. Like sometimes there's a ceiling. International shows, I mean, people like to watch shows made in their home market, whatever it is. But Squid Game was so massively popular that everyone was like, oh, is there going to be, a phenomenon? Every international show will be the new big hit. Not necessarily, but Squid Game certainly has cracked that code. And there's really no part of me that wants to see an English language version of it. I feel like I've seen the version of Squid Game. If you want to give me spin-offs or prequels, I'm open to the idea at least, but a do-over, except in English, it feels extraneous to me.
Yeah, and I think there's something that's very universal about a lot of the themes that they're exploring in this show too. So yeah. I just don't know how much it would be needed, but again, if David Fincher really wants to do this and he's got a good idea around it, I'll definitely be watching.
All right. Well, I think we can recommend Squid Game Season 2 on this Ringerverse Recommends themed episode. I enjoyed the season. Again, doesn't hit as hard as Season 1 just because we saw the blow coming and we prepared ourselves and we braced ourselves for this season. And it's really hard to recapture Season 1 just hitting us all unawares. But I think they absolutely justified the idea of continuing this story for reasons other than pure franchise building. Will it get to that point where it feels manipulative and like they're just trying to string this along? Maybe, but we are definitely not there yet. And I'm excited to see the conclusion of this story sometime in the summer or fall, hopefully not too long. So I'm glad that the wait won't be as long.
Yeah, no, I agree. And I think, again, it would be different if we had to wait another 3 years for this. I think that would be way too long. And I think it wouldn't be worth all of that. But the fact that we know it's right around the corner, I'm definitely looking forward to that in 2025.
All right. Some quick programming teases. I mentioned that this is our penultimate pod of the year. Tomorrow, New Year's Eve, Steve, Jomi, and Jess will discuss the things they missed in 2024 on Mint Edition. Later this week, the Midnight Boys, pew pew, will kick off 2025 with a Lord of the Rings themed episode that I will not spoil. That's one that, like season 1 of Squid Game, I think is better if it just takes everyone by surprise. Next week, I will be back on Button Mash with the most anticipated video games of 2025. The Midnight Boys will catch up on Skeleton Crew, and Mint Edition will do a 2025 confidence meter. Over on House of R, you can check out Mal and Joe's Top Moments of 2024 pod, which should be up when this episode is. And then they will cover Skeleton Crew episodes 5 and 6, maybe with yours truly, talking a little lore on that pod. So we are rolling right into 2025, not missing a beat.
To watch over everyone, I must become no one. Then you are ready, as I've always known you would be. I guess I should probably take that oath then. You just did. So, rise, a watcher.
And on this episode, we are rolling right into our second segment, and we are talking about the third and final season of Marvel's What If on Disney Plus, which is 8 episodes, down from 9 in the first 2 seasons. And these rolled out essentially one a day from December 22nd on. So much like season 2, again, this has turned into a holiday tradition where we find some new animated Marvel waiting for us under our tree. And I guess we can maybe talk just briefly about our feelings on this series heading into season 3. what's your high-level take on season 1 and season 2 of What If? And what do you want from What If? Do you want straight-up silliness and absurdity? Or do you want semi-serious considerations of MCU sliding doors moments? What if this thing happened slightly differently from how it did on a show or in a movie? And let's actually see how that would play out. Or do you just want it to be wild, big swings that you never would have anticipated?
Yeah, I mean, at least for me, for the first 2 seasons, there were definitely a bunch of episodes that I enjoyed, but a lot I didn't enjoy. I think that's part of the nature of any anthology series. But at least for me, what I enjoyed the most with this show overall, now that it's over, was I think the balance between like the deeply silly episodes that just have fun with this format and being able to just experiment with whatever and having no repercussions like you do with the big tentpole movies where you have to be connecting the dots between all these different films. I think the concept really works. And combining that with some of the bigger swings where they're actually like taking a concept and really trying to apply it in a mini movie for a lot of these, it feels like. But there's a lot where there's just so many misses where it's a frustrating show to me overall.
Yeah. Yes, it feels a little like other shows of that nature, anthology shows where you never know what you're going to get. And that's part of the appeal, but also sometimes the downside. And you could even compare it, I find myself comparing it to, say, Star Wars Visions or even like the early seasons of Clone Wars, for instance, where there's a lot of great stuff, but also some misfires and some where you're just like, what am I watching and why? There's a lot of that in What If. And I would say that the ratio of those to the ones where I'm really glued to the screen has not improved over the course of the series. Yeah. I would say it's progressively gotten a little less compelling with each subsequent season, to the point where the fact that it's over now, or at least going on indefinite hiatus, of course, they could always just bring it back if they decided to, if they had enough good ideas. But season 1, a lot of bangers that season, right? And again, it was new. It was the first MCU animated show, and maybe people didn't have high expectations, and they hit us with like T'Challa Star-Lord and Marvel's Zombies and the birth of Strange Supreme and the Infinity Ultron arc, which was actually really good, I thought. And then season 2, the highs were not as high and the lows were at least more consistently low. Again, even from the start, you had like, what if Thor just went to parties or whatever, right? But that's okay if it's just, there's one dud or one change of pace, to put it charitably, between the good ones. But then when it becomes more of those and the really good ones are the exception, then it holds my interest a little less. So season 2 just felt a little more mediocre most of the way through.
Yeah.
And season 3, they're going for it, I guess, would be one way we could say. They're not leaving anything on the table here. Like they're throwing everything that they have left at the wall, and some of it sticks and some of it not so much, I guess. So, we're getting the Howard the Duck and Darcy couple having a kid, and then that kid becomes Birdie, who's played by Natasha Lyonne, and then that turns into an origin story for her, who comes back later in the season. Sometimes there are attempts at continuity in this anthology series, which sometimes work so well, and sometimes it's like we took some of the characters from that season 1 Thor episode and gave them their own sort of spin-off arc, and it's like, of all of the stories in the multiverse that we could tell, this is what we choose. And I don't want to dump on like being creative and weird, because you should be doing that in a show like this, but also sometimes doesn't completely click.
Yeah, I think the Howard the Duck and Darcy episode is a very good example of that. Like, I think it's a really funny concept, and for parts of that, I really enjoyed it. But when it's one joke that's extending for 30 plus minutes or whatever it is, around 30 minutes, it's a long joke, and it's fun to have Josh Brolin come in and voice Thanos for like a second, but it's so deeply unserious where at a certain point you're like, what are we actually doing here?
Yeah, I do appreciate that the production quality is always high. Yeah. And I think you can make a case that it'd be better if this were different visual styles from episode to episode. If it
Right.
were more like Star Wars Visions, where you were giving different studios a crack at these things, and maybe it's enough to have the narrative variation, and then you kind of need that consistent through line of the look of it to tie it all together. But would be kind of nice if there were more adventurousness. But I think it looks good. It's always polished and well animated, and the fight scenes are flashy and everything. And, it's nice to have mostly the live action actors reprising their roles here.
Yeah.
And, don't want to cost any voice actors work, but also sometimes it can be jarring if you're playing like a Marvel video game and it's like not even the likenesses or the voices of the characters so well. And
Right.
so to have that consistency here is nice. Though it really did feel like in this season, especially, it's like, let's cram in as many phase 4 and 5 characters as we possibly can, which, given the relative success of those phases, is a little bit of a letdown at times. Like, we're digging deep on the bench here.
Yeah. I feel like for that reason, this season the most to me felt like very much a reflection and kind of a microcosm of a lot of what's been going wrong in the multiverse saga.
Yeah.
And them trying to not necessarily force, but really put a big spotlight on a lot of the characters that are not working that much on the big screen, or at least didn't get the kind of reception that Marvel Studios expected. Like, I really loved Shang-Chi when it came out, I guess in 2021 at this point.
Yeah.
But there was a part of me that was a little disappointed. Was like, we've been waiting a while for a sequel, and this was the sequel that we got.
we got a Western where he teams up with Kate Bishop, which was kind of fun, but it was like, what if 1872? Like, we already had the What If 1602 episode in season 2, so already it feels like we're repeating certain formats or templates for episodes.
Yeah, like granted, like that was probably one of my favorite episodes of the season, and I really liked how they kind of like introduced the young Iron Fist in there as well.
Yeah.
But at the same time, it was just like, let's just get Shang-Chi too,
Yeah. Right.
And it's tough because it's, I mean, there was that one episode where it's like Agatha and Kingo from Eternals.
Yeah.
And are they ever going to make another Eternals movie even? So it's just confusing for some of the purpose of some of this stuff.
And that could be the season saving grace. Like, let's tie up some loose ends. Hey, we're never going to get another Eternals movie. Okay, maybe we can resolve some stuff in What If, but that's not really what we get here either, right? It's not really. I mean, I kind of like the idea of, okay, what if Marvel were a Western? What if Marvel were Gundam mechs versus kaiju? What if Marvel were a Busby Berkeley Bollywood musical? Like, for half an hour, I'm willing to watch any of this stuff, which I guess, even when it doesn't really land for me, I'm not mad about it. The way that watching like Secret Invasion or something where I'm like actively frustrated by the storytelling or what are we doing here, as Charles would say. Here, I feel like what we're doing is just, kind of casually watching a half-hour animated show in the dead week between Christmas and New Year's. Like, my expectations are not that high and the bar is not that high. So if it's just kind of a fun, forgettable diversion, that's enough for me. I guess I'd prefer that it would be more than that because it sometimes has. And I think the hit rate could be higher.
Yeah. No, I definitely agree. And I think for me, like, two of the big standout episodes for this season was like the Western one, and then the one after with like Riri Williams taking on Quentin Beck. I think just whenever, the emergence, like when they really go for a concept that's kind of like a little bit more out there, and that just can be taking little elements, little pieces from what we've seen in the MCU movies, and then really going a long way with them. But then the opposite side of that spectrum, like one of the episodes I really didn't like from this season was the one where it's basically just like a long Red Guardian and Bucky like buddy cops. I mean, I don't even know what they were really fully going for.
I kind of like that just because I'm enjoying David Harbour's work these days. Like, between What If and
he was having fun.
Commandos, we're getting a lot of David Harbour, and he seems to be understanding the assignment. So that's good. And a little like buddy cop road trip comedy, comic relief.
Right.
Some of these, like, tonally, they feel a little off, or, like, I kind of like, I guess, the comic pairing of like Winter Soldier and, Bucky and Red Guardian kind of worked for me, but, ultimately feels like fluff, or sometimes like feels like it should be bigger. It's like, wait, if this Red Guardian is in the Avengers now. Like, this seems like it would be a big deal, but also it's just one of many multiverses. So it's not actually that big a deal. I guess part of maybe what the show has suffered from, feels like a cliche to say, but like multiverse fatigue, which probably even the 3 years that the show has been running has come more to the fore, where we've just seen so many multiversal stories that the thrill of that has worn off a little bit. It'd be one thing if we weren't getting that in every live action project. And if it were like, okay, this is the fun little sandbox where we can be creative and explore all the nooks and crannies of the MCU. But that's what we're doing in basically every MCU project at this point, or every superhero project. So What If doesn't stand out as much in that respect.
Yeah, no, I think that's a great point. And I think that's why, at least for me, like, their formula just didn't really work towards the end, where like each of the seasons, they had a bunch of separate episodes that weren't really connected at all. And they would kind of tie a little bit together, but they would all ultimately lead to a story around the Watcher, around Owatu, and having bigger stakes within What If, like around the characters like Captain Carter. And especially this time, that just didn't really work for me towards the end of it, because they did this exact same thing with the first 2 seasons. And I think the last episode was actually just called like What If, What If?
Yeah.
And at that point, I'm like, this is where we've jumped the shark. Like, this is doing a What If scenario on our own What If show. So it's
right.
I enjoyed a lot of this series, but I think this came to the right end. Like, this was the right time for it to conclude.
Yeah. I guess if you're gonna jump the shark, the last episode of your series is a good time to do it, maybe. but yes, it did feel like it ran out of steam, or like they used up some of their best ideas, which you'd think it'd be almost unlimited material. But I guess, as with the comic, like eventually you just kind of use up your A ideas and you're down to the B and C and D ideas. And you're right, like it can get frustrating when it's too low stakes and small stakes, although that can be a nice change of pace, as I said, because so often it's about saving the world or saving the universe or saving the multiverse. But they have gone back to that well a number of times in What If alone, with all of these different existential threats. And yeah, you do that for the 3rd season in a row. And we've already seen Infinity Ultron, and we've already seen these other arcs. And okay, now it's kind of a watered down version of that. And, much like with Squid Game, it's just, there's diminishing returns. Like, even if it's good, it's just not going to pack the same punch the 2nd or 3rd time you've seen it. But I think episode 5 was maybe also my highlight, the emergence, the Vision, Ironheart. And maybe that's partly because, in some of these episodes, we get almost a sneak peek of a character who hasn't really had their full-fledged MCU debut yet, which I guess could seem like, okay, is this just sort of a teaser for Ironheart more so than it's a standalone product? But also, at least it's not giving us someone that we've seen many times before. And it's, made me anticipate that series a little more. Not that it's going to be exactly the same premise, but still.
Yeah, I feel like to some extent, this is also just one big test study for Marvel Studios as well. Like, even with something like exploring Bucky and Red Guardian, like, we are going to see that too when like Thunderbolts, when that finally happens. And I guess seeing how fans react to Riri Williams now. And I was really interested in the point of them also finally bringing in the X-Men. And that was also like definitely a highlight of the season for
Storm
me as well.
shows up.
Like having the Storm, like Thor crossover, and having Allison Seeley Smith also come back to voice Storm was just like a fantastic choice. Still doing the very dramatic line readings of her announcing her using nature's forces and all of that. So there were a lot of little things that they did like that were a lot of fun, even if I know that there are definitely some possible ulterior motives here with seeing how things work out and how much they want to build on that moving forward.
Yeah. And I guess the legacy of this series, it's, not super popular as Marvel series go. That's just, animation often has a ceiling, and, we love animation here at the Ringerverse, but there are certain holdouts who just aren't going to get as invested in an animated show. And then also, this is it's almost the opposite of the Marvel Spotlight branded shows, where they're trying to send the signal you don't have to have watched anything else to watch this, which often isn't actually true, even when they label a show that way. But this would basically be the opposite of that, where if you haven't watched anything, on the one hand, I guess it's sort of self-contained stories, but also you will have no idea who these people are or why they're doing anything they're doing if you haven't watched a lot of other Marvel projects. So I think given those barriers to entry, that was always going to limit its appeal somewhat, regardless of the quality. But I think there is still the legacy of just experimentation and showing that anything goes, which has, kind of been ported over into the MCU. Breaking the seal when it comes to animation in the MCU. Also establishing, say, Marvel Zombies, which is getting its own spin-off series in 2025. And establishing some characters. For better or worse, I guess, this became kind of the Watcher's show at the end. And I wonder whether that means we're going to get more Watcher in live action, which I'd support. I always enjoy the Watcher, always enjoy Jeffrey Wright. Or we're going to get more Captain Carter, because Captain Carter's kind of the star, the breakout star of What If in general, especially prior to this season. And we got very briefly Captain Carter in Multiverse of Madness. Right. A very rude introduction. Did not serve that character particularly well, as Haley Atwell subsequently said. And she's coming back for Avengers Doomsday. And we don't know exactly in what context, but is that going to be Agent Carter or is that going to be Captain Carter? Maybe this will all have turned out to be a backdoor pilot of sorts for Captain Carter really getting a full-fledged entry to the live-action MCU.
Yeah, I think one of the points you made in there too, with how this broke the seal for Marvel Studios animation too, I think is a really big part of this as well, because I feel like for years they've kind of been lacking on that front, while like DC Studios, even as they've been floundering with their live action movies, they've been consistently good with their animation. And I think with this like becoming its first like multi-season series as well, this being before X-Men 97 kind of brought this whole interest back as well. And again, with them like having Marvel Zombies coming up too, and I know there's going to be a Spider-Man animated series next year as well. Hopefully it's just a sign of more things to come and more interest, at least in the animation world for Marvel Studios.
Yeah, and there are callbacks to season 1, even with
Right.
Peggy and fights that she's having here. So she's sort of the through line. And again, maybe you need some sort of narrative backbone to tie all of this together. But it did feel at a certain point just like, let Peggy go home already. Like if you can't let her find love, at least like let her go home and be alone, instead of just bringing her to different universes over and over to fight these cosmic forces. And then at the end, I guess everyone becomes a Watcher, just as we do as we're watching the Watcher who watches the Watcher watching the it's so meta at this point.
Yeah.
So we did get a Madison shout out in
I was
in
not
episode 8.
that was definitely not on my bingo card coming
No.
into this season.
Me neither. Would have liked a more prominent role, but yeah, there was a line in episode 6, think less what if and more what the hell. And that was kind of
I was cracking
the
up.
theme of this season, which was sort of self-aware, for better or worse, like big swings and lower contact rate, which is often the trade-off when you take big swings. Sometimes you hit a home run, but even the home runs were fewer and far between, I guess, in season 2 and especially in season 3. But they went for it. They tried. You can't say that they restrained themselves too much. And it's just inherently, it's a tough format because you're looking at half an hour-ish. And even if you're not starting from scratch, you're starting with established characters, it's still always going to be tough to tell a self-contained story. And we did get a to be continued and some 2-parters, but still, like, to have to establish a new universe and a new setting and a new premise and then wrap it all up in half an hour or less. There's a lot of potential in that, but it's just a difficult thing to do well. And, I think it was always going to be fairly hit or miss. And it was more miss as the series went on, but I'll still think back on it fairly fondly as a worthwhile experiment that, if it makes sense to resurrect at some point down the road, once there's just more material to work with, once we've skipped ahead a phase or two and we've got more characters and storylines and what if scenarios, then by all means, bring it back for a 4th season.
Yeah, maybe one day we'll get that Frog Thor episode as well.
Yeah. And it's also nice to have something that comes out annually, even if it's only 8 or 9 episodes. Like that's something that I think Star Wars and the MCU need, because you can't just keep cranking out the live action shows without any interruption. So you do need a Bad Batch or a Visions or a Tales of the Jedi or, something like this, like What If, to sort of whet our appetites in between. Not that it would be the worst thing for some of these franchises to take a break at some point and leave us wanting more and let us recharge our interest. But then again, we would have fewer things to talk about at the Ringerverse. So I'm arguing against our own interest here. Also, I think it's funny that even in animation, and this was also sort of self-aware, they kind of nodded it, but some of the endings of these episodes do turn into your early phase MCU movie, just like special effects fest, which sometimes works better in animation, but still, like the Gundam episode, the Kaiju versus Mechs, cool premise, but then it does turn very much into like, let's destroy New York City again, which, we're recording in New York City right now. Leave our city alone for once, please. But they're like, you can't drop a nuke over the city. And then they do anyway. And there's just like a smoking hole. And, we don't like see anyone who lives in that city. So we're not connected to, there's no stakes, like emotionally speaking, really. There's, Bruce, I guess, and Sam is his best friend now, I guess. And like a lot of their backstory is just narrated by the watcher, which again, like it's just hard to do that in half an hour. Or in the finale, you just kind of have watchers beating each other up for a while. And it's not really clear, like, can they get hurt? Like, did this beam of energy hurt them more than that beam of energy did? Like, what is the power scaling here? I can't really tell. So they just kind of punch each other for a while until we decide that they've had enough.
Yeah, it's tough because it really, like to your point, like it's just tough to really pack all that into a 30-minute episode. And some of these concepts were just extremely ambitious. And like that episode 1, I mean, it's just ending up with it like being like Hulkzilla there.
Yeah.
I just had that was the one I think I had the most questions about, where even just the beginning, I was like, why is Thor in a mech suit? How is this going to benefit Thor?
Right. Yeah. And like Moon Knight was in a mech, I think.
Yeah,
it's like, all right, Moon Knight's back. Sure. Why not? We haven't seen Moon Knight in a while. We didn't get Moon Knight season 2. So let's just stick him in here. It's not like Oscar Isaac can get work otherwise, I guess. So anyway, they've had enough. I guess we've had enough. They've come to the end of What If, and we've come to the end of our What If discussion. Is there anything like left on the table here that I'm just putting you on the spot here, but like, was there something that you always wanted to see that you were like, oh, well, we got Howard the Duck and Darcy instead of this thing, this hypothetical that I always had in my mind, or some character I would want to see again, that this afforded the opportunity for a comeback potentially?
It's a good question. I did kind of like the focus on Howard the Duck, honestly, even though it was a lot. Yeah. I like that choice just because it's so random.
Yeah.
I would have liked to see, maybe this is just me being greedy after X-Men 97 as well, but more X-Men characters. Mm-hmm. Like if they really are going to go this full direction of trying to promote like what we have coming and new characters, why not even throw in the Fantastic Four a little bit?
Yeah.
And they could have just redone some of the older Marvel like What If comics. I think like one of the first one was like as simple as like what if Spider-Man was in the Fantastic Four. Like I think it's tough to do something like that before the Fantastic Four movie even comes. And I think there's all these intentions of trying to save some of that stuff for whether it's X-Men 97 or for the X-Men movies or for the Fantastic Four movie. So again, that's just part of my own greed. But I think again, that's part of the issue that I had with this season, at least, where it's kind of some of the characters that I don't really want to see as like I loved Agatha all along. We got a whole season of that. Mm-hmm. I don't know if I need a full other episode to start the season with Agatha too. So it's tough when you have this many characters. Like to do somebody like I don't know. I guess I've been playing some Marvel Rivals, so somebody like Magic or one of these other characters that we haven't seen. Well, I guess Magic was briefly in X-Men 97, but a character like that we haven't seen like on this kind of stage. Was there anything you were hoping for?
I don't know. Howard was definitely not on my wish list, but it does kind of feel like, Howard could be like a Guardian of the Galaxy. Like, why not? If, we have a raccoon and we have Groot, like, why not Howard? maybe this is a springboard to a more prominent role. But yeah, I think some of those things like, okay, maybe we need to whet the audience's appetite for Ironheart, but I don't think people could be more hyped than they already are for X-Men or Fantastic Four. So it's kind of like, let's keep our powder dry for the big unveiling, right? Like, let's not steal our own thunder when it comes to that. We can have Storm come in and she'll bring the thunder, I guess. But beyond that, we'll wait for the big rollout here. So, all right. Well, we have covered it all. We are watchers as well, and we enjoyed watching these. I guess we could give a more qualified recommendation, if that, to What If Season 3. Not wholehearted, not full-throated, but more of a, hey, you got a little free time here. You want to low stakes stream something that you may not have to pay 100% attention to, then that's there for you. And sometimes it's nice to have that too.
Yeah, no, I agree. And we'll see when it comes back with Marvel Zombies with a completely different format, one that's, I'm assuming, not going to be an anthology style series. So that for the big What If fans, if they're out there, there'll definitely be something else to look forward to, at least.
All right. And you also have something else to look forward to on this episode, listener. We will be back in just a moment with our Ringerverse Recommends picks for December. Daniel, thank you very much.
Thanks for having me, Ben.
Uatu, do you know if there truly is a road after this one? Beyond all we have seen?
With some mysteries, sometimes the only answer is another question.
All right, it's Ben back again in a new location with a wardrobe change and a dachshund to deliver your regularly scheduled edition of Ringerverse Recommends. We considered skipping this month, what with holidays and vacations, but I'm glad we went ahead because we've got some great picks for you. If you came for Squid Game or What If and haven't heard a previous installment of Ringerverse Recommends, this is the monthly mini-pod where Ringerverse and House of Our hosts and friends join forces at the end of each month to give a little love to the lower profile fandoms and shout out the recent releases that we've liked but haven't had a chance to devote a full podcast to. They can be books, comics, movies, video games, TV shows, podcasts, audio dramas, anything goes, and we've got a great range of recommendations ready to unwrap right now. Despite the difficulties of December scheduling, almost all of our hosts are here for some holiday cheer and a Happy New Year. I'll be back with my selection midway through and again at the end to recap the picks. And remember, you can submit your own recommendations or respond to ours via email at ringerverserecommends@gmail.com. Let's lead off with a man who loves himself some Superman, Supervan, Lathan.
You will never hurt another person. I have to keep them safe.
The boys do not live in a bubble anymore. They live in the real world.
They're not ready.
They have each other, and they have you, and that's gonna have to be enough.
Please don't leave me. I promise I won't.
It is time you finally accept you can't do this on your own anymore.
He doesn't have to.
We have an idea.
I will kill you right here.
Then do it!
Time to die, Lois.
What's up, guys? It's Van giving you my Ringerverse Recommends for December. And it's easy. Very easy, because it's the final season of Superman and Lois. Fantastic show. Gone too soon. RIP to one of the best Superman adaptions ever. This season was truncated. It's only 10 episodes. Normally it's longer than that. But you got everything that you needed to get out of the final season. A lot of people know about the stories behind the scenes. They took some of the characters down. They shrunk the story a little bit. But it ends in a ridiculously emotionally fulfilling way. We see the resolution of Superman's story, of Lois's story, of Lex Luthor's story, of all the supporting characters and everything that made this particular iteration of Superman in Smallville so amazing. I'm telling you right now, there's a Superman movie that is coming out next year. Next year it's coming out. James Gunn. I'm looking directly at James Gunn right now. It better be good. It better be fantastic. Because we know that James Gunn didn't want this show to continue because he only wants one Superman, and that's fine. It's his prerogative. He's the head guy over there. But if this movie sucks and I had to give up my friends in Smallville for it, I'll make you pay, James Gunn. I'll make you pay big time, baby. Ringerverse recommends Superman and Lois, the final season. If you haven't watched the whole show, start it. If you haven't finished the final season, finish it. Goodbye, Smallville.
Mere illusion.
You should have stayed away.
Trickster, feel my thunder! The futile struggle, even for gods. In the end, all will kneel before doom.
What's up, everyone? Steve Ullman here for Ringerverse Recommends for the month of December, and I'm talking about the hottest video game that's out this month, Marvel Rivals. That's right. Do you like Overwatch? Good. You don't. That's right, because you're playing Marvel Rivals. It's really fun. It's a 6v6 team shooter that is, evocative of those classic games that you love. Overwatch, Team Fortress, everything like that. You get to play as a roster of like 33 characters. It's one of the most comprehensive rosters that I've seen in a free-to-play game in a very long time. My current main is Jeff the Shark.
Hey,
Love
wait,
him.
Hey, come in right now. Come in. Are you deadass a Jeff the Shark main?
Yes.
Hey, I hate your guts.
No, not as bad as Iron Fist.
No. Because I started playing quick play, right? And what y'all like to do, I'm a Moon Knight
Swallow
main.
you up.
Swallow me up.
Throw you off the map.
Relax. And throw me off the map, okay? That's cheesing. I do hate Iron Fist mains, though. Y'all are the real ops, for real. But Jeff the Shark mains also suck, too.
I love Jeff the Shark. And I love Marvel Rivals. It's honestly a really good, easy to get into game, and it's not as toxic as you think it is. The sweats haven't taken over. I promise you, you're going to have a good time. And guess what? It's free. So you can mess around with it, and it doesn't cost you anything. Marvel Rivals, December. It's great.
Hey everyone, it's Mal. I am here for Ringerverse Recommends for December, and I would love to tell you about Flow from Latvian animator and filmmaker Gints Zilbalonis. Flow is checking in about 85 minutes, and every single one of those minutes is magical and memorable, and you will be thinking about it as I have been nonstop after you see it. This isn't on streaming yet, but it will be pretty shortly after you get to see Ringerverse Recommends. And if you have a chance to see it at the movie theater, it is out on limited screens. Don't miss the opportunity. I got to watch this in a sold-out theater in LA, surrounded by other adults who all were moved to tears. This is an absolutely beautiful story starring Kat. There are no people in this movie. There is not a word uttered, and yet I would say there are words uttered nonstop because every meow or bark or squawk tells us something sincere about the experience that the characters are having. The animation style is fascinating and beautiful. The stunning backdrops and landscapes and waterwork. And then the actual animal effects, which are very distinct in the foreground. The sound design. Real animals were recorded in order to give us cats' meows, etc. The scrabbling of the claws on the deck of the boat, everything about this, all of the little details and touches just make it so immersive and memorable. I don't want to say much about the story. If you watch the trailer, you know that Flow is the journey that Kat and his fellows go on as a flood affects their home. What has happened to all of the people? How long have they been gone? These are not answers that we ultimately get. This is a story about Kat and about life and about embracing change and conquering your fear and making new surprising connections and forging and fostering community. I found it quite stressful to watch because as an animal lover, I was very concerned about Cat and our other beautiful critters the entire time. But I thought it was so moving and inspiring, downright spiritual and mystical in spots. I truly cannot recommend this highly enough. It is one of the favorites for Best Animated Feature heading into Oscar season. You will not regret watching Flow. It is sensational. I hope you enjoy.
Tommel had taken the long way back from scouting. Against his better judgment, he let down his wolfskin hood and welcomed the wind's needles as he pressed through the howling dark. Tommel's gods were in this cold, as they were in the snow and the crocus stem promise of colour fast asleep beneath the freeze. If this was the last time they ever wrapped their arms around him, he wanted to feel it.
Oh, hi, it's me, Joanna Robinson. I'm here with one last sort of book-centric Ringerverse recommend for you here at the end of the year. I have been having so much fun this year bringing you like a new title that came out that month. For the most part, I stuck to that. I'm breaking the rules slightly here at the end of the year. Who is going to stop me? Nobody. I want to recommend a book that came out in traditional publishing format in October. It actually first came out a couple years ago, but this is the first time you can have it in like a beautiful bound. I just want to show you how gorgeous this it is. It looks like this. It is Blood Over Bright Haven by M.L. Wang. It's got this beautiful red edges and then like, you know, a map at the end and all that sort of, all the fantasy goodies you could possibly want. And this is a story about two sort of underdog, ostracized beings in a mystical land who come together to sort of tackle some of the more restrictive structures of the society that they live in. If that sounds very dry, it's not. It's a really inventive, magical world. And it might start a little familiar to you. It might start with a bloody, wintry attack, and they might say the word direwolf on the first page, but after that, we're really not feeling very Thronesy at all. If anything, it's just a perfect little magical world to immerse yourself in, and a bunch of characters that really sneak up on you in terms of how much you wind up caring for them. Emma Wang is like a fairly popular author in the sci-fi fantasy genre. The Sword of Kagan was like a really very, very popular book that she wrote. And this one I had a great time with it. And then I want to, again, because it's the end of the year, I'm going to break the rules. Who's going to stop me? I want to tell you which of all the books I read this year and recommended, I want to tell you which one was my favorite and give it one more push here at the end of the year. It's the holidays. Maybe you have some extra time. I want to recommend The Tainted Cup. This was my favorite book, the new book that I read this year, Robert Jackson Bennett. And this is, if you don't remember me talking about it before, it's a mystery novel, sort of like Holmes and Watson-esque mystery novel set in a magical world where there's sort of mysterious threats from without and deeply dangerous threats from within. And I love these characters so much. And I love this. This is like my new favorite magical world. And there's going to be sequels. I think that Robert Jackson Bennett is really talented. Everything he writes is wonderful, but this is like a real step up. And this world, I cannot wait for the next installment in it. So get in at the beginning, The Tainted Cup. And then also, if you have not yet, Blood Over Bright Haven, enjoy your holidays. Enjoy catching up on some books you haven't read. And, find me on the various social media or, email us hobbitsanddragons@gmail.com if there are books that I missed that you think I really would have liked that came out this year. And we'll see you in the new year. Bye.
Everyone's dead, hon.
There's no one left.
Did you sleep through the matinee, kid? Whoever might be left is out of time.
What do you want?
I haven't seen anyone in the longest time.
Everyone disappear but me. Now you.
Hey, it's Ben, and I'm bringing you a recommendation for an MGM Plus original. Wait, don't fast forward. Hear me out. I will admit this show is not well known, and I would not have known it existed if I hadn't seen a single well-placed sign in the subway. You might not see a sign, which is why I want to highlight it here. The sign said Earth Abides, and I did a double take when I spotted it because I did not know that one of my favorite books had been adapted for TV. Earth Abides, the show, is based on the 1949 novel of the same name, a post-apocalyptic classic by George R. Stewart that inspired Stephen King's The Stand, another of my favorites. One of the great things about Earth Abides, both the book and the show, is that it doesn't rely on a lot of the heightened tropes of the genre. Almost all of humanity is killed by a pandemic, but there are no zombies or mutants or roving gangs of lawless marauders. There's just the challenge and the satisfaction of surviving and thriving in a world without people. That makes the book tough to adapt because the protagonist, Ish, is initially alone. There isn't a ton of action, and a lot of the intrigue comes from Ish's observations and ruminations. It may remind you of The Martian, in that it's sci-fi about nature and knowledge and solitude and sciencing the shit out of things. It's also kind of a cozy post-apocalyptic story, which is not something I say often. Ish is played by Alexander Ludwig, who most recently appeared on TV as the wrestler Ace Spade in one of my favorite shows of the past few years, Heels. He's playing a very different character here, an improbably jacked geologist and family man who's trying to rebuild civilization. Took me some time to get used to seeing Ludwig in a role like this, but if I can't have Heels Season 3, then I'm glad I got Earth Abides. This is a 6-episode miniseries, and I wish it were longer. I've written and talked about the problems that arise when creators try to tell stories in 6 episodes that are probably better suited for either a movie or a longer season. And as you might imagine, compressing an almost 400-page novel that takes place over decades into this amount of screen time requires some compromises. There's more than a little lost in translation. The quality of the writing is variable, the time jumps are jarring, and one part falls prey to one of my post-apocalypse pet peeves, which is when characters act like resources are scarce, even though they could probably camp out in a Costco and have supplies for life. Nonetheless, I enjoyed the show, and I think you might too. The whole thing aired in December. The finale was on Sunday, so you can watch it start to finish right now. And yeah, you might not be familiar with MGM Plus unless you watch From, which a listener nominated on the October edition of Ringerverse Recommends. But Earth Abides is worth watching, even if it means subscribing to an unfamiliar streaming service. And if you don't want to watch it, that's fine, as long as you read the book instead.
250 years after the event, the Martian Revolution remains one of the most formative events in human history. This is not a novel observation. Contemporaries quickly realized the momentousness of it all as it was happening. Historians have only amplified the conclusion that the Martian Revolution was a big deal. A really big deal. Every political, social, and economic trend in interplanetary history runs through that chaotic decade. Its results and outcomes and legacies form the basis of modern human civilization. Everywhere you look throughout the solar system, the legacy of the Martian Revolution lives on.
Hello, Ringerverse. This is at Cram. Now, normally, when I record these monthly missives, it's for a book recommendation. And there's a big ol' fantasy book out this month. But if you're caught up on the Cosmere, you probably already know about Wind and Truth, the 5th book of Brandon Sanderson's Stormlight Archive. And if you're not caught up on the Cosmere, you have many thousands of pages to get through before you're ready for the new book. So that's not the recommendation I'll choose for December. Instead, I come to you with a fictional podcast that requires no prior homework. It's on the Revolutions podcast feed, where the latest season details the Martian Revolution. It's a story about, well, a revolution on Mars after its colonization by humans. It's influenced by classic sci-fi, like Heinlein and Kim Stanley Robinson. And I also find elements that remind me of modern epics, like Red Rising and The Expanse. But the real trick that makes the Martian Revolution work is its framing. The revolution itself takes place around the year 2250, but it's told from the perspective of a historian around the year 2500, which gives him as much distance from the Martian Revolution as our real-world, modern-day historians have from the American Revolution. And who better to act as an in-universe fictional historian than Mike Duncan, the history podcaster, who draws on his previous work narrating the revolutions in France and Haiti and Russia and more. In the Martian Revolution, this framing means that Duncan's narrator speaks about key characters the same way a real historian would speak about Benjamin Franklin and Alexander Hamilton, because the audience quote-unquote knows who they already are. He invents fake primary and secondary sources that he can reference and critique. And through these storytelling tricks and more, he weaves a compelling narrative that manages to both entertain and inform the listener about how revolutions actually happen. The Martian season of the Revolutions podcast is planned to run 25 to 30 episodes, and we're only a third of the way in as I record in late December. So start listening to this unique podcast story and be transported to a potential future for humankind.
And remember, when you hear the whispers, call for help. Do not attack.
When you hear the whispers, what do you think he was on about?
It's Dorman, right?
Yeah.
Then Dorman, shut your damn mouth. Why do I always get stuck with these rookies?
Hey, the kid's got a mean cleave. Give him a chance.
Quiet.
Happy holidays, Ringerverse. It's Matt James, the deputy art lead here at The Ringer and also frequent Button Mash guest. I'm here today with another video game recommendation for you. I recommend that you do not play Path of Exile 2, available now in early access on PC, Xbox, and PS5. Don't do it. The game is too good. If you have people in your life who depend on you, if you have responsibilities you need to check in on occasionally, don't play Path of Exile 2. If you've ever enjoyed a game in the Diablo series, the series that heavily inspired the Path of Exile series, don't play Path of Exile 2. You won't enjoy Diablo games anymore. They feel like mobile games now to me. I haven't felt such a pull towards a video game since Elden Ring came out. And much like Elden Ring, this game is actually pretty challenging. Unlike Elden Ring, though, there's no penalty for dying, and there's checkpoints everywhere, so it feels a lot more fair and less cruel. The real star of the show here, though, is the combat in Path of Exile 2. It's fast, it's responsive, and most importantly, it is deeply, deeply customizable. Every skill or spell that you carry has slots in it for support gems, and those support gems that you plug into it change the way that these things behave and interact with each other. So what ends up happening is the way that you can create your character and design your build out, the freedom there is just unprecedented. And if there's anything you don't understand in the game, a term, an effect, or whatever, you can just click on it and it'll give you a concise explanation of what frenzy is or whatever. Should probably look up what frenzy is. Now, it is an early access, so it's not quite finished and polished yet, but I have no doubt that if this game comes out in 2025, as it's supposed to, it will be a Game of the Year contender, for sure. But remember, do not play Path of Exile 2. And hey, Happy New Year!
Hello, soccer enthusiasts! It's time for another unforgettable season of BSL Play! Let's head back to the game to find out.
Make the smart choice here. Escógeme a mí.
What's up, Ringerverse? It's Jomi back again with another recommends. End of the year, I'm recommending the video game that changed my life completely and utterly. That's right. Backyard Soccer is back, baby. You can get it on Steam right now. Like, hey, shout out to Galaxy. Won their 6th MLS Cup this year. That's right. And so I'm all the way back into soccer. I mean, I've always been into soccer, but I'm so deep in it now. And Backyard Soccer, forget FIFA, EAFC, whatever the hell they're calling it nowadays. Everybody's playing Backyard Soccer. I love this game. I mean, y'all talk about Pablo, y'all talk about Amir, y'all talk about Pete, but my GOAT, my guy, play his music. That's right. Kenny Kawaguchi is back in Backyard Soccer. If you're not locked in with me, then I need you to get all the way out of here. Backyard Soccer is legitimately one of the funnest games I've ever played. I've been begging Humongous Entertainment to bring it back, and lo and behold, as God is my witness, they did. I cannot wait to get. Look, we out here talking right now. I need to go back to my Steam account, start playing this game, baby. Lock in on Backyard Soccer this winter. You will not regret it.
Is this Christmas?
Yes, we're doing a special Christmas everywhere all at once. Oh, God.
Ham and cheese toasty and a pumpkin latte?
Who are you?
Wrong room. We are on a top secret mission.
What?
Who are you then?
Joy.
Top name Joy? Thank you.
It wouldn't be the holidays without a Doctor Who Christmas special. Arjuna here for Ringiverse Recommends for the month of December. My recommendation is the Doctor Who special, Twice Upon a Time. The, Doctor Who annual Christmas special is something that has been going on for years and years. And, there's been a ton of these, right? There's been some that are just kind of weird one-off adventures that aren't very good. There are some that are super important to the Doctor Who lore and history. But this one in particular is just like a really nice kind of throwback that is such a bottle episode, and one I think that many can enjoy, fans of the longtime show can enjoy. And even those who are like mildly interested in Doctor Who, but haven't necessarily kept up, or, whomever. It's just a nice episode to kind of, watch with the family, see some stars you recognize that are in the episode. It's an episode that's penned by former showrunner Stephen Moffat, and it's, not the worst of the Christmas specials. I won't say it's the best, but, I was entertained. I enjoyed it. I liked it. And, I think there are worse ways to spend 44 minutes, or an hour of your time, depending if you have ads or not. Than watching Doctor Who. So give it a watch. You can watch it with yourself, you can watch it with your family, your friends, whomever. But, that's my recommendation for the month of December. Just want to say a quick shout out to all the Ringiverse fans for a great 2024. We're excited to see you in 2025. Got so much cooking up. Back to you, Ben.
Well, thank you, Arjuna. Ben here with you one more time to put this pod to bed. While I'm here, I'll mention 2 December shows on Netflix that I haven't had a chance to check out yet, but hope to sometime soon. 100 Years of Solitude and Gentry Chow versus the Underworld. I'll also give a Vulcan salute to the dearly departed Star Trek Lower Decks, which went out with a wonderful last 2 episodes and will be sorely missed around the Ringiverse, at least by me and Jomi. We don't have a full listener nomination this month, but thank you to Ben, who wrote in with a shout out to the animated show Invincible Fight Girl on Adult Swim and Max, and to Serafina, who recommended the mobile game Monument Valley 3 on iOS and Android via Netflix Games. We welcome nominations for next month. Just send 200 to 300 words on an unsung January nerd culture release to ringiverserecommends@gmail.com. Okay, it's time for the traditional recapping of picks. From Van Lathan, the finale of Superman and Lois on the CW. From Steve Allman, with an interjection by Jomi, Marvel Rivals on Windows, PlayStation, and Xbox. From Mallory Rubin, the animated movie Flow. From Joanna Robinson, the novel Blood Over Brighthaven by M.L. Wang. From me, Earth Abides, the MGM Plus miniseries. From Zach Cram, the Martian Revolution season of Mike Duncan's Revolutions podcast. From Matt James, Path of Exile 2 on Windows, PlayStation, and Xbox. From Jomi Adeniran, the Backyard Soccer remaster on Steam, Backyard Soccer 98. And from Arjuna Ramgopal, the Doctor Who Christmas special on Disney+. Thanks to Carlos Chiriboga for producing this episode and to Arjuna Ramgopal for giving it the green light. Stay tuned for the Junior Mints on the things they missed in 2024, continuing coverage of Skeleton Crew, and a bunch of pods about what we're hyped for in 2025, including next week's Button Mash on our most anticipated video games and game adaptations. We appreciate your support this year. We look forward to spending next year with you too. And until next time, we hope that you'll recommend the Ringiverse.